How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to another CP104 review session. Today's review session is going to be on lists and strings. As always, if you want to check out any of the code snippets used in this video, make sure to click the link in the description to take you to the GitHub where all of that is stored. So you might think it's kind of weird that CP104 groups lists and strings together in back-to-back weeks. I know I did when I was first taking CP104, but as you'll come to see, lists and strings are a lot more similar than they seem to be at the start. Let's just get right into it. So a list is essentially just a list of values. In Python, it doesn't matter what those values are. They can be matched, they can be mismatched. It doesn't make a difference. Another term for a list is an array. But what a list is let's start a new list and we can give it values. We can say 1, 2, A, B, and we can put whatever values we want in here. They don't necessarily have to be the same. They can be the same. So this is one way to make a list. Another way to make a list is using the list constructor method. So we can do that. And these will return the same data type. When we create them. So these are both valid ways to make lists. And lists are pretty interesting because they can store multiple values. When we look at a normal variable, it can only really store one value, but lists and strings can both store multiple values. Obviously in a string, it's not going to be a value, it's going to be a character, but both of them store multiple values in a certain order. And we can access these values using something that we call indices. So let's say we want to access the first value in this list. Let's just get rid of this. We want to access this first value. So let's just say we can print, let's say list at value 0. So make sure whenever you are indexing a list, you use a square bracket right after the list name, and you start off. If you want to find the first character, you have to start at 0. List indexes or indices are always starting at 0. So it goes 0, 1, 2, 3. So we can see what happens when we print this. We get 1 right here. Let's just make sure you guys can see that. So we get the output as 1. And we can also do something kind of interesting. We can get a list of -1, and this will give us the last value in the array. There we go. So another thing to keep in mind with lists is that you can overflow. So let's say, for example, we have 4 values, and we know because we started at 0 that 4 is going to be out of range. So let's try doing that, 4. And we can see list index is out of range. Let's see what happens if we do it in the negative. So -1 would be this one, -2, -3, -4. So let's just actually do -5. We gotta delete this one first and foremost. And yeah, we can see both in the positive and negative direction. If we do something that's too large, that's larger than the length of the list, it is going to be out of bounds. So Python doesn't allow that because it has a certain amount of memory stored for that list. So now we can move on to a concept called slicing. As you can see here, I have the list variable name followed by square brackets and then 2 indices that I want to cut the list in. So let's see what this means here. So as we can see, indice 2 is going to be right here, and indice 4 is going to be right here outside of this list. So what this is going to do is it's going to print a list that is these 2 letters. We can just show that off. So as we can see, it creates a sublist from this list sliced into that. So we got to keep in mind that this is going to take the index at position 2 up until the index at position 4 minus 1. So it's always going to be this and then this minus 1. We can also do something if we want everything past the index 2, we can do that. So this is going to be the same thing. It's just going to be AB. And then if we want everything before the index 2, we can do that. Or, well, again, it would be before the index 3. But yeah, so we get 1, 2 there. We can also do something pretty interesting with indexing. This is a little bit more advanced, but it's kind of cool to show off. If we do 2 and then we say -1. So what this is saying is we want to go from the start, because there's no value here, till the end. And then this -1, if you would take a guess at what it did, it's kind of weird, but it will reverse this list. So if we can print that out, it goes BA21, which is kind of weird and quirky, but that's what that does, because we're slicing this list at index null to null. So it's just going to get the whole list. And then this -1 is pretty much the way that we traverse it. So that's why that happens. So that's a way to reverse a list. But let's move on to some list methods. So first and foremost, to add items to the list, we have to use append. So this is going to add an item to the end of the list. So let's say append 5, and we can print out this list. And as you can see, 1, 2, AB5. So that's how you add to the end of a list. So there's also a method called insert. So list.insert. This you have to provide a index as well as a value. So let's say 0, 5. So this should, oops, I spelled that wrong. There we go. And we did not print it. My bad, I'm all over the place. There we go. And as we can see, this 0 is the index and this 5 is the value. And we can see 5, 1, 2, AB5. So we've added to the end and we've added to the beginning. We can add in the middle, of course, if we change this to like 2 or something. There we go. Now it's somewhere in the middle. So those are 2 ways that you can add to a list. We can also remove. So we can just say list.remove 2. And this is going to remove the first occurrence of this value. So let's print out the list. And no more 2. We also have pop. This is going to pop, as the name suggests, the value at a certain index, the given index. So let's say we want to pop the value at index 3. This is going to be the last value. Print list. Let's just, here we go. See, we can get the last value out. Of course, we can do the same thing by doing -1. Sorry, -1, and this will be the same as previously. There's also a way we can sort this list. Obviously, this isn't going to work, so let's have it as -1 and -5, and we can sort it, and we can print this out. We can see it's going to sort it in ascending order. -5, -1, 1, and 2. We can also, we saw a way to reverse it before, but we can also use the reverse method. There we go. So those are pretty much the basic methods that a list can have. There are a few other ones, but I think everything you need to get done, you can get done with those 6 methods. But the next thing that we have to look at is how we traverse these lists using loops. So I think the easiest way to traverse through a list is this way. We can say for I, again, this is just our increment variable, in list, print I. So we're used to having a range when we do for loops, right? But here, this is already something that we can iterate over. The reason we had to do range when we were working with numbers is because Python doesn't understand from this to this just by itself. You have to give it a range iterator to create a range between those numbers. But here we already have a range that's defined that we can iterate over. But this isn't going to return 0, 1, 2, 3 as you'd expect from like a range of 0 to 4, for example. This is going to return 1, 2, -1, -5. So let's just try that out and see. And there we go. It prints everything out. And so we can also do it the other way though. We can use the range. Let's say range length. So this is the way that we find the length of a list. Length of list. And now this I is going to be set to, as we can see, 0, 1, 2, 3. And then we can access each element by indexing it. So list at I. And this will return the same as if we use the for loop accessing the variables. There we go. And we can convert the same thing to a while loop. So I is equal to 0, while I is less than the length of list. Print A at I, sorry, not A, list at I equals plus equals 1. And moment of truth, same thing we get there. So that pretty much covers it for lists. Now let's move on to strings, and we can see why they are similar. So let's get rid of this and let's create a new string. Let's go hello world. All right. So as it is the case with lists, we can also index a string. So if we were to print this, we get H. We can print -1. We get D. And we can slice it as well. So let's say 0 to 5, for example. Actually, let's just say 1 to 5. And we can get LO. So it's these 4 values right there. We can traverse through strings the exact same way we do with lists. So for I in string, this will give us obviously the value every time we iterate through. So we can print I and we'll get the whole string printed out letter by letter. So hello world. Let's do the same thing as we did before. So for I in range length of string, as you can see, they even use the same length operator. So that's pretty convenient. Let's say print string at I, and this will result in the same thing. There we go. And just for continuity's sake, let's do it with the while loop as well. So while I is less than the length of string, print string at I plus equals 1. And there we go. So here's our first example. We want to return a string that is the union of the contents of our source string 1 and our source string 2. So every element that appears at least once in either source 1 or source 2 must appear once and only once in our target that we return in the end. So to get started, we want to initialize our target variable. This is going to be what we return. So we can just literally say return target. We know that we want to return this every time. If there's nothing in common, or if there's nothing in the two source lists, we can just return an empty string. So we want to go through each source list and see which values aren't already in target, because we want to include everything in source 1 and everything in source 2 if they haven't already been added to target, because we only want to add one of every character. So let's go for character in source 1, right? We're getting every single character in source 1. And then we can check if our character is in our target or not by saying if character not in source 1. So this is, sorry, not source 1, target. This is saying If our character isn't already in target, then we want to say target plus equals character. And then we want to do the same thing for our source 2. In source 2, if character not in target, then target plus equals character. So that's our entire function. So let's try it. Let's print the union of, let's say, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Keep in mind, this is a string. We can't do this with a number. We can't iterate through a number. That wouldn't make any sense. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And let's say, let's overlap a little bit. So 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So we should expect to get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So let's run this. And as we can see here, we get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So that's it for example 1. Let's move on to the next example. So for this problem, we want to find the range and the median of a list of numbers. So first and foremost, let's just find the range because that's pretty easy to compute. The range is just going to be the max of numbers minus the min of numbers. So these functions find the maximum value, and this one finds the minimum value of the array. And then we want to compute the median as well. So we know that for the median, we have to sort our array because we need it in ascending order. And then we have to find the value that's in the middle. And the value that's in the middle for an array of odd numbers, not of odd numbers, but of odd length, is just going to be the value right in the middle. And if it has even amount of elements, then it's going to be the average of the two values that are in the middle. So we can write this pretty simply. We can say if length of numbers modulo 2, again, this returns the remainder by divided by this number. So if that is equal to 0, obviously we know that if something is divisible by 2, it's going to be a remainder of 0 when dividing by 2. So this means that it's even in this case. We can say our median value is equal to numbers. So this is our array numbers indexed at its length divided by 2. Notice we have to use the floor division here. This is because if we just use the normal division like this, this returns a float. Even though it's a float with 0.0 at the end, we know that because of this condition, it's still going to return an error because Python interprets it as a float and it only takes integer values in the index. So if you ever find a value error when you're indexing something, and there might be a possibility that it is a float, always check that condition because more than likely that's the case that it isn't working. So then we have to add then the number right beside it. And it's going to be at length numbers divided by 2 minus 1. And then we know that to average this, we can just divide it by 2. And then let's just have our else case. This is if it is odd. Our median value is just going to be that number. Numbers at length of numbers divided by 2. And that's it. We just have to return these two values. There we go. All right, so let's test this really quickly just as a sanity check. And let's just have them sorted just so it's easier for us to see what the median is going to be. So we know that here is going to be the median is going to be 4, and the range is going to be 5 minus 1, 4. Sorry. The range is going to be 4. The median is going to be 3. Of course, 3 is in the middle. So let's run this. We get 4 as the range and 3 as the median. Let's try adding 6 here so that it comes up as an odd length array. So we should expect 3.5 as the median and 5 as the range. And there we go. Perfect. So let's move on to our last example. All right. So in this example, we want to convert a string that is called sentence into title case. So that means the first letter of every word is going to be uppercase. All right. So let's start off by creating a title case sentence. Let's call it, and we'll initialize that as an empty string. So this is going to be the value that we return. Again, remember that we cannot change a string after we've created it. So we're only going to be like adding on to this string by creating a new string and setting this variable to that new string. We're not going to be changing the string at all. All right, so what we have to do is split this sentence into a list of words, and after that, convert every first letter into uppercase. So we can do that pretty easily by saying, let's just create a variable called sentence list, and we take the sentence. For ease, let us convert everything to lower. So we know that everything in this sentence right now is lowercase because we just want the first letters of each word to be lowercase. And so you might be wondering, how do we split a sentence or a string into list? We can use the split method. So by default, if you give it no parameters, this will split a sentence or a string into a list based off of where it finds a space. But let's say, for example, we want to split it based off of this line character. That works too. But for this problem, obviously, we want to split it based off the spaces because we want to split it into a list of words. So now let's iterate through the words. For word in sentence list. So this is going to get every single word in this list. And then we can say title case sentence plus equals. So what we want to do is get the first letter, make it uppercase, and then just add the rest of the word onto it, right? So let's say word at 0, grabbing the first letter. We want to convert this to uppercase. We know we can do that with dot upper. And then we get the rest of the list, or sorry, rest of the word. So then we can say word. To get the rest of the word, we can say 1. So everything after the index 1. If we're to just stop here, this is all going to be mushed together because we're not adding any spaces back into it. We're splitting based off a space, and then we're not adding any more spaces. So then we can just add a space like that. There we go. So every word changes its first letter to upper, then just adds on the rest of the word, and then adds on a blank character. So obviously it's not going to be a big deal, but for the eyes that are looking for it, we're going to know that we have an extra blank space at the end of our sentence because for the last word, it's going to expect that there's something coming after it, but nothing ever does. So this is going to still be included. So to get rid of that, we can use dot strip. So this strips any unnecessary white space at the end of a string. So this will just keep everything nice and tight and packed together and not use any white spaces that we don't need. So let us print this out, convert to title case, and let's say, hello world, I love Python. All right. Print that out, and there we go. As you can see here, capitalize the H, the W, the I, the L, and the P. So there you have it. That's working with lists and strings. I hope you guys enjoyed this bi-weekly review session. Make sure if you need any of the code snippets, there will be a GitHub link in the description. And any questions that you may have, write them in the comments. I'll be answering them. But yeah, thanks for joining me. And I will see you guys, if you guys are watching these as they come out, in 2 weeks' time. And if not, when you watch the next video. Have a good night.